Okay, so far we've looked at liberalisation and we've looked at interventionist solutions. Now I'm going to look at external solutions, so things that people can do to you rather than you do yourself. I'm going to look at aid and debt relief together because although they're different, the impact is by and large similar. And in particular, the effectiveness is going to depend a lot on the underlying strength of the government. We say, well, what's the difference? We can say that aid generally comes in the form of grants or soft loans. Sometimes in the form of physical assistance in the case of humanitarian aid. Debt relief, is simply, kind of a decrease. It's kind of a writing off of part or all, of a government's national debt. So the idea in each case is that the government should have more funds. That's what it boils down to. So here we're writing off some of your existing borrowing. What that does is it decreases interest repayments on the loan. What it may also do is improve your credit rating. Because it's pretty clear that you're now going to find it more easy to pay debt, and therefore it makes it easier for you to borrow at low interest rates in the future. All of that then allows for an increase in government spending in principle in the right sorts of areas. Likewise, aid can do a variety of things, but again, grants and soft loans, again, they're providing you with money that can be used to finance development. Aid sometimes can also come in the form of skills, kind of training, that type of stuff as well. But fundamentally what's happening is that you have more funds available to invest in the right sorts of things that are going to promote development. So if we look in a little bit more detail, then if we take aid first of all, we know that aid comes in a variety of different forms. One form obviously is humanitarian aid. So this is practical assistance in the event of natural disasters or health emergencies, that type of thing. And very few people would argue with the idea that humanitarian aid is essentially useful. How effective it is depends. There's been lots of talk about how sometimes the aid doesn't make it through or it arrives too late. So the effectiveness of the delivery of aid can be an issue. But I think few people would really be arguing the idea that if there's some sort of major earthquake or volcanic eruption that we should be trying to help out. The questions then come around kind of more conventional aid then. So standard aid is funds that are coming into is money that's coming into projects. That will then, or it can just be, literally, it can literally be financial support that's allowing the government of a low-income country to spend money in the right sorts of areas and to help it develop. The idea is obvious. It kind of helps to close that kind of Harrod-Domar savings gap. Is one way of looking at it. It provides more funds and so on. But we know that aid of this type has come in for a number of criticisms. So one is kind of the focus of aid. So some criticisms have tended to be that it goes on capital projects. So in a lot of low-income countries, you've got schools with no teachers, hospitals with no medicine. Because the aid comes into building the infrastructure, but the government doesn't have the current spending to be able to actually achieve anything very much. Obviously, other criticisms are the risk of dependency. That what you do is you create the wrong type of incentives. So we've seen elsewhere that in a lot of countries, the top performing graduates, they want to go and work in the aid sector because they know that that's where the money is. You get safe, secure job, you can support your family and so on, rather than starting up businesses. And obviously the wrong type of aid, what it can do is it can destroy local businesses. So if you're sending food aid, or you're sending clothing, that type of stuff, it means there's no chance of local firms getting set up in that market because you can't compete with free. The kind of the elephant in the room obviously is the strength of governance of the economy to which the aid has been given. And we've looked at lots of examples where we've seen that aid is essentially ineffective. It gets creamed off or it gets put into the wrong sort of areas. And Mbisa Moyo, when she's been talking about it, she says that even in the best case projects, probably about 20%, only 20 cents on the dollar, is making it through to the poorest members of society that the aid was actually intended to support. So in this case, what we'd say is and a third type of aid that you can that we can talk about. It then overlaps with what we were talking about in some of the other categories. The third type of aid is you can call it trade aid. Yeah, and that's the sort of things that China has been doing in sub-Saharan Africa, where that's those package deals that we talked about when we talked about foreign direct investment. And we said that basically in exchange for favourable trade, you get given packages of infrastructure and so on and so forth. And we've talked about those elsewhere. So is aid desirable? Well, much depends, but it's not clear that very many countries have grown successfully and developed through conventional aid. So we probably conclude that conventional aid is, by and large, pretty unhelpful. Emergency aid, obviously, is essential, but better if it's well delivered. Trade aid, probably the jury is out, but there have been some encouraging signs there. When you look at debt relief, again, the story, a lot is going to, we've said how it works. In terms of the evaluation of debt relief, a lot depends on, kind of governance. Again, there's not much point in cutting debt, if all that's going to happen is that debt's going to rise again because of poor governance, corruption, maladministration, and so on. It's not really going to achieve a whole heap. On the other hand, the kind of format of debt relief has been criticised. So a lot of debt relief has been delivered through organisations like the World Bank, particularly. And a lot of that debt relief has been heavily conditional. So their argument is, well, look, if you don't reform your budget and reform your economy, if we give you debt relief, you're just going to end up back where you started. But the consequence of that is that what it certainly in the past has been insisted on is structural adjustment programs, which is kind of IMF, World Bank style, essentially Washington consensus policies. So although you get debt relief, actually you've got to cut government spending. You've got to open up your markets, privatise, engage in free trade. And there's been a lot of criticism of this, saying, well, okay, fine, you've cancelled the debt, but actually the things that governments have to do to acquire that debt cancellation have actually made the level of development and the underlying strength of the economy much weaker. So in the end, probably on this type of thing, we're saying, well, okay, it can make a difference, but a lot's going to depend on what you do with it, really. So unless it's coupled with governance reforms or strong governance in the economy, we've got a problem here, because it's not actually, a lot of this type of stuff isn't actually creating businesses and growth that are then sustainable, and that's where that kind of sustainable improvement in tax base and development is likely to come from. It's sorry, I thought I wasn't recording there for a minute. Never am. Sorry, and that's where it's kind of that idea of kind of sustainable structures. That's really where development's likely to come from. And aid, unless it's a stepping stone to to further change and reform, is not really going to make much difference by itself.